the scenario is, do I have it in my pocket? Let's see, do I have this? Yeah, I do. It actually says, first I drink the coffee, then I do things. Where's all the other features at? Where's all this information? Well, 3D printing is limited to the size of the nozzle. In this case, she was printing with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle. You can see the default line width, which is the smallest the line can go, is 0.42 millimeters. If we come in here into our bamboo slicer and we select the object, there's a ruler tool up here on the top right. The ruler tool will then give you an option to do two different selections on your model to go ahead and measure the distances between those 2 points. So for example, we're going to measure the eye on the left outmost corner and the right outmost corner. And I clicked the wrong thing. You can undo over here. We want this bar. So we can see that that distance is 0.347 millimeters. It's smaller than the minimum line width of the slicer. And that's because of just the limitation. The nozzle itself, the smallest line width it can do is a 0.42. So if we were to slice this plate, I'm not going to do any colors or anything fancy. You can see right from the get-go, where's all those features? If you hold the print to the side, you can see all of the text and everything becomes translucent because the slicer is completely omitting that and saying, no, I'm not going to do it. It's too thin. You can try turning on the line wall generator to Arachne. Hit slice, and it kind of goes through and tries its best to fix those errors. For the most part, Arachne will work. But in other scenarios, if Arachne doesn't work, we can size this up using that ruler tool to make sure that it meets that minimum line width. So if we look back at the preview, we can see that it slowly makes sort of that bean there. Some of this is here, some of this might be all right. But what we can do is, if we hit prepare, ruler, and we come over here and we say, well, I want this distance and this distance to at least be 0.42. There's a little pencil here. And we can say 0.42 and press enter. And it scales everything up like in proportion, all the way, all the X, Y, Z. It scales all values up to accommodate that 0.42 on this distance here. I'm not saying everyone is going to be 0.42, but it should help. So when you slice, it captures more of those features. Now you can see this feature here is a little different than it was before, because it's starting to capture more of the detail. It is supposed to be 2 beans, and it's still not 2 beans. If we look here, these are supposed to be kind of like bean shapes. These are kind of, sort of, maybe yes and no's, just because of the distances. And even this N, right? Like, look at this. Look at this thing. Look at this thing. Compared to this N. Look at it. See that? See how pointy that is? That's not what that's showing there. So again, we could say, well, let's go ahead and scale it up some more. Let's say we want this line and this line to be 0.5. Let's say 0.52. Increase it by that much more. Now if we slice, the details getting better. Getting better. So at the end of the day, here's a few key points that I usually stress to my clients. And that's, not every design that you find on the internet is made for 3D printing. Yeah, people will be knocking stuff out left and right, but did they test it? And if so, do they have those recommended print settings on their files? There's a lot of creatives out there whom just spit things out left and right and say it's a 3D model, it's a done deal, boom, I'm not going to deal with it. But if you're looking for specifics and you want to make sure that the design that you downloaded prints correctly, always double check it in the slicer preview before sending to print. Now, again, scaling the whole object up will make it so you can print those features. But if you need something specific, for example, this is supposed to be a pen topper. The top of the pen has a minimum width of the circle here. Doing this size increase is going to increase the size of this circle. So now it's 3.286. If we go look at the original size is 2.19. So it goes up almost a whole millimeter. Now, that's when you start having to figure out, is that size correct for you? So let's say it's not. Let's say it have to, like, no matter what, be 2.19. Well, what we're going to do is let's go ahead and cover up this hole with an object, and we'll do that by adding a sphere, or not a sphere, a cylinder. So we'll go to add part, add cylinder, and now we'll get the exact size of this circle. So if we go here, we can see that it's 42.45. So we'll measure this one to 42.45. Now that's the exact size of this guy. We'll go ahead and line it up, move it ever so gently in all directions, and then scale it down. We only want to do that top portion. And we'll bring it down. And again, always double check the positioning of it. We want to make sure that it doesn't hang off, or if it's like, you know, if it's just slightly askew, we want to make sure that that's not noticeable. So we'll go through and just reposition it like so. .42 and 41. That's why. It's 1 millimeter smaller on this. There we go. Boom. So we pretty much fixed that hole, roughly. Let me go ahead and adjust it some more, because now it's bothering me. Because you can just barely see it right here. Other side, can you see it? You still can, yep. So let's go ahead and modify that size one more for 41 point. It was 6.5, we'll do 7. And then we'll move it. Just a little trial and error. There's other ways to do this, but this is one way. And now if we were to slice, let's see, does it have any sort of markings of those circles? It does not. So in the slicer, we already know that it's going to go ahead and skip that hole. So now we want to add the exact 2 millimeter hole because it expanded. So now if we right click and say add negative part, cylinder, we'll size this cylinder as a 2 millimeters. 2 millimeters. We'll make sure it's long. We'll rotate it. Rotate it 90 degrees. And then position it. So kind of eyeball the center. We can sort of see the previous circle. So we'll use that as our guide. And now we can hit slice. Let me get rid of the supports just so y'all can see. Now we have our new 2 millimeter hole. Cleaned up the existing hole. Made it big enough to show all the detail. And we are good to go. So here we have our SVG loaded up on the outside of Metapod's face. We selected the option which you can see right here. Use surface. The use surface option allowed the SVG to follow the contours of the image. Now, when you do add the SVG, it's like looking at it with a light, right? You're looking at it straight on from this. So the angle of the extrusion is going to be pretty much where you place it. We can edit this some more and say, well, we want the angle to face up instead of down. We'll find that little cube where to grab it, and we'll do it like here and let it reload. And you can see the angle of the extrusion is where we faced that line from this middle point here to that circle. So now the extrusion is a little bit more straight on. I'm saying I want this to be 2 millimeters from the surface of the object. That's how much I want it to stick out. Now, the question was, can I get this SVG and print it separately and then just kind of glue it together? You absolutely can. Now that this SVG has been made, it is still technically a separate object. So if you select the Metapod, right click and select split two objects, we now have a contoured spider. See that? But see, it loads up originally flat, square. Not what we want. Here in the tools for the SVG, there's this checkbox here that says use surface. And it automatically goes and tries to contour based on the surface of the object. So you can see like this bulb, this bulge that he had here, it went ahead and rounded and essentially made an extrusion of that. And then depending on where we position it, let it load, give it a second, and it goes ahead and updates. So we want it over his eye, right? Something silly. Give it a second to load. And there it is. So that's going to do, it's essentially doing like a surface extrusion. It's getting the SVG sort of like cut out and literally pulling it out based on these values. Now, it may take a second to load, but once it does, you're rocking and rolling. And again, now that the SVG is contoured to the object how you want it, over here on the left-hand side, if we right-click and select Split Two Objects, now the Louis Vuitton eye patch is separate and it is contoured to Home Dude like so.